In the last video, we finished up assembling our short block. So in this video, we're going to be moving on to the top end and completing the long block section of this engine build. And for that, the next thing we're going to be doing is throwing on the heads, and we got some pretty cool heads here to show you. For our cylinder heads, we're going to be running a set of these Chevy bow tie heads. These are really cool heads, not very common. They have 202 160 valves in them, originally 64cc chambers. They've been skim cut, so they're in the 62 to 64cc range now. They've got 184cc intake runners, screw-in rocker studs, and they are currently port matched, and they have hardened valve seats. So it's a very good cylinder head to run. These cylinder heads are aftermarket only. Technically, they're for off-highway use only, but if you won't tell, I won't tell. So really cool stuff. These are very popular on like circle track cars, and this is the best flowing and performing cast iron cylinder head that Chevy ever put out. So they flow pretty much just as well as aluminum heads, if not better than some. And yeah, so we should have really good throttle response out of these heads, a lot of reliability, and I'm excited to see what these things could do. So we're continuing on with our same Felpro gasket kit that we've been using for the rest of this build. So we'll get this bad boy put on. Make sure that you have it facing up where it says up. I'm glad I just checked that real quick. You need to make sure that everything lines up in the correct orientation. Pop that sucker on. For our head bolts, we're going to be running a set of ARP head bolts. Whenever I put these in, at first I'm just going to drop a couple in just to hold everything down. It's important to note that on small block Chevys, these are not dead-ended holes, meaning they don't just stop in the casting. They actually are open-ended into the coolant passages. So it's important that you put down a sealant, a thread sealant, otherwise these are going to leak on you. So I'm going to be using black RTV. So like I said, whenever I put these in at first, I'm just going to set them in just to kind of keep the head from coming off. Then I'll pull them out, and the rest of them I'll throw some lube on. So let's go ahead, throw the cylinder head up on the block here and start getting these things put in. Again, like I said, just going to be dropping these bolts in loosely just to keep the head from accidentally popping off and causing problems, which would be a bad day if that were to happen. All right, so I just have the bolts all placed in the spot that they need to be. So you have two medium length ones that go on either end here on the bottom or middle row. And then you have the long bolts, 3 in the center, 4 on the top, and then all the small bolts go down here on the bottom. So now I'm going to go through and put some black RTV on each one of these, and then I'll just get it finger tight or hand tight down to the head. And then once we get all those in, we'll start our torque procedure and then flip over to the other side. Now that we have all these hand tight, we're going to start our torque procedure. So you want to do these just like we did with our main caps when we installed those. You want to do it in steps. So consult your, there should be a ticket that comes with your bolts that you get, and it will tell you what the overall recommended torque is. These ARP bolts are 70. So I'm going to do steps of 25, 50, and then I'm going to finish off with 70. So I'm going to go ahead and get my torque wrench set up here and start with our torque sequence. So you want to start with this first one here, then move to this bolt, then move down, move over, and just follow this pattern. You want to work your way kind of around, kind of going opposite corners. So we're here. Now the next place that we want to go to is down here, and up here. Now, one thing that did cross my mind is the paint scheme that I did here. I'm not trying to go for a look to make them look like they're aluminum heads. I genuinely actually saw this paint scheme on another engine, and I just liked it with the black and then going gray. I'm not trying to do like aluminum silver, although you can get that color paint. It's not my intent. But after I was thinking about that, I was like, man, I'm gonna get lit up on the internet about trying to make these cast iron heads look like they are aluminum. That's not the goal. So we did our first round. Now we're just gonna do the same thing. Next step we're gonna do at 50 and then finish off at 70. So I'm gonna keep going around, get the rest of these the steps in, and then I'll pop on that other head. Moving on, the next step that we're gonna do is put in our guide plates for our push rods. And then these originally came with 3/8 studs, but we're going to be upgrading to 7/16, give us a little bit more rigidity in our valve train. So let's go ahead and put these bad boys on. These are labeled for the upward orientation. So before we put this on though, I am going to put some of this ARP Ultra Torque assembly lube on the threads. It's not good to put anything in dry. That's what she said. And we will put a little bit of that on. And screw this bad boy in, and then just move on down the line. Okay, so I ran into a little bit of a snag, no big deal, but I've got these bolts ran all the way down until they dead stopped, and my guide plate here is loose. So I compared these to the old studs, and it looks like these are a thread or two longer. So what I'm gonna do is just shim it with a couple washers underneath, no big deal, and we should be back in business. I'm gonna use grade 8 for it, and we should be in good shape. So let's try it with 2. I think it's gonna be enough. I just kind of eyeballed it. And let's see. Slide that on. Screw it down. Yeah, so that's gonna do the trick right there. So we'll shim each one of these. It's gonna be a ton of washers, but whatever. We'll shim them all out, and that should take care of the problem. Okay, so the torque spec for these call for 55 foot-pounds for cast iron heads, 45 for aluminum. So now we'll go through and get these guys torqued. With all of our studs installed, the next step that we are going to be moving on to is measuring for our push rod length. So for that, I'm going to get you guys in close. We're going to be using a method with a checker as opposed to the rocker arm. It does the same thing, but this is a lot quicker. In order to check your push rod length, you're going to need a couple things. You're going to need to have the lifters that you're going to be using and install them in the lifter board. And then the next thing you're going to need is a push rod checker. So this is an adjustable mock-up push rod that you'll install, and you can adjust it to a different length. And then what you do is whenever you get this set, you take it out and measure it. And I'll show you guys that as we get to that point. So we'll drop this push rod in. And then the next method that we're going to use, or the next tool that we're going to use, is going to be a push rod checker. And you can use the rocker. That's the traditional way of doing it, but this I found is a lot quicker and a lot simpler to set up. And it just slides down on the rocker. But first, we're jumping ahead a little bit, before we get there, you need to make sure that your lifters are on the base circle of the camshaft. So we'll get this engine turned over until they're both fully seated. Well, in typical fashion, I ran into another snag. Go figure. So my push rod checker tool is too long. Those lifters actually were on the base circle. They were all the way down, and this was too big to even get this on a check. Trying to get a little bit creative, which I kind of pretty much figured out what the length is. I'll show you what I did. It's not the right way. I don't advise you to do it this way. get the right tool, but I'll show you what I did. Okay, so hypothetically speaking, say you have a push rod in here or a checker that fits. What you would want to do is to set this all the way down and then put the push rod in and then adjust this out to lengthen it until you get to the point where it's just kind of slightly snug, but on the center of this flat end here. And that will give you your push rod length. Then what you would do is take a big caliper, and then you would measure this out, take the number, and then look online and check to see what the closest size is. I mean, you can have custom push rods made to whatever length your heart desires, but it really is just a waste of money if it's, you know, a few thousandths or less, you know, to what you need. So I'll show you what I did. I ended up actually taking, there's a nut that is supposed to go in between here. It's a jam nut. This guy right here sits in there, and that's so whenever you get the length, you can tighten it down so that it doesn't move in or out on you whenever you go to take it out. Well, I tried to collapse this thing. I took it out so I could try to collapse this thing as far as I could, and it still was too long. So what I did was I put it in here, or put this tool on, and I went to the next opening over and checked it. And with the base circle, or with the lifter on a base circle, I just kind of eyeballed the center, and you're probably not really going to see it that well on camera, but I saw that the flat part, or the part that lines up with the flat part, is pretty much exactly at the top of this little hex nut right at the bottom of the tip. So what I did was I took my caliper and measured it. I'll show you that. That gave me 7 13/64. Whenever I do 13 divided by 64, that brings it out to, I believe it was 0.2031. So I looked online, and the closest one, there's two directions. I could do a 7.2 or 7.205. So either one of those are going to work perfectly. That's such a minute difference in length that it's not going to affect any performance. So now I know that I can order those push rods. Whenever I get those ordered in, we'll get them thrown in, get the rest of the lifters in. I do want to set my lifters in an oil bath while they wait. You don't have to do it. Some people do it, some people don't. But since these are hydraulic lifters, it's good to get them filled up with oil to get the correct pressure, tension on them whenever you go to set your lash for your rockers. All right, guys, so we got our push rods and a few other things, so now we can continue and wrap this thing up. So a couple of those things that I put on here already is just valve cover studs. I put on a pointer, a new crank bolt, and then the new dipstick tube. Those things, really, there's nothing to it, so no point in filming it. Yep, this is new, but this is temporary intake. We're going to be running a multi-port fuel injection on this engine, as I have stated previously. I put this, just threw some paint on a manifold I had laying around and put it up here to help kind of keep it clean. And then, you know, whenever we go to drop this in the chassis, we're going to use this intake just to, again, keep it clean and to lift this thing and set it in the frame. So I believe in the last video, or the last clip, I said that the push rods measured out to be 7.2. I measured them again, and they're actually 7.1. So we got our new push rods. They're trick flow. Of course, the only in-stock 7.1s they had were chromoly, which is about double the price. But hey, it's going to be lighter, stronger, whatever. We got nice stuff, whatever. Anyways, so we'll get our new lifters put in. They've been soaking in an oil bath for probably about a week or so at this point. We'll get those dropped in, get our push rods on, and then we'll put on our rockers. I'll show you what rockers we're going to be running, and then we'll get all that adjusted and tightened down, and yeah, throw that intake on, this thing's done. There's a little bit of a debate about whether or not it's absolutely necessary to put these in an oil bath. Technically, I guess you don't have to, but it's definitely recommended. I've always done it. This goes for hydraulic lifters because you have a little chamber in there that fills up with oil. And if you don't have oil in them, well, you run the risk of getting incorrect readings whenever you go to set the valve lash and what have you. For our rocker arms, we're going to be using Comp Cam's full roller rockers. These are stainless steel, so they should be strong for us, and it's roller tip as well as the roller trunnion, so we should get a pretty good efficiency out of these guys as well as that strength. So let's get these bad boys put on. So I have all these just finger tight. One thing I do want to show you guys, issue that I'm running into, is that the couple of rockers here are a bit of an angle because my guide plate for my push rods right here is keeping it from being perfectly straight. So that's coming in at a bit of an angle. It's on the valve, but not great, not the way you want it. You want it to be as centered as possible. So I'm going to take these off, loosen up the studs, and try to move this guide plate over just a little bit to get a better alignment and see if that helps. Much better. Setting your valve lash on a hydraulic roller rockers is actually very simple. So what we want to do is find zero lash. So whenever someone says zero lash, if you look, you can see all this up and down play. Here, I'll even loosen up a little bit more. You see all this play here with your push rod. Well, what we want to do is just be able to move it up and down and tighten it until we get to the point where, right there, it's not tight, but you're not moving up and down anymore. So we'll loosen a little bit to show you. That's right there is about zero lash. And then whenever we get to that point, we'll do half a turn for preload. So it's important, whenever you're doing that, you need to make sure that the lifter is all the way down. With the valve cover off and with these lifters, it's easy to see, but a good practice is you can go through and just check every single one. So we're at zero lash and we're just gonna move down. So I'm actually gonna take the preload out of this and just we'll imagine as if we couldn't see the lifters in here or couldn't tell when they're at base. So we'll just bring that to zero lash, and this guy down. And so see right now, it doesn't matter if it's on the lift of a lobe or not. We just want to bring it to zero lash, and then we'll turn over the engine a couple times and then just keep checking this. And then when everything is at zero lash, then we'll go through and put our preload in each one of them. Now what we'll do is we'll turn over the engine, we'll go half a turn and check it again. And just kind of do a rinse and repeat. So see, this one was loose again. So we're gonna come bring it down to zero. That one's tight, this one's tight, maybe has a tiny bit tight. Take a little bit out. See, that was on the peak of the lobe of the camshaft. So now we'll take this out. See, good. Keep going. Same thing. Good. Then we'll go over another half turn and check it again. And I took the locks out of the top of each one of these poly locks, so that way I'm not fighting against them at all. We'll come tighten it down whenever we have it set. Another half turn. And just go through. We should be pretty good at this point, but we'll do a couple rotations just to make sure. Good. Another half turn. Good deal. Now we just go through and do half a turn of preload in each one. Half a turn. Half a turn. That one's tight. And use a wrench on it. It's tight because it's on the lift. Half a turn. Come through. Half a turn. I put the pilot locks back in, so now at this point we just want to hold the bottom nut and just don't let that move at all. That way you keep your adjustment, and then you just tighten down this center screw, and that locks in your adjustment and keeps from having these run the risk of backing off at all. All right, now we're pretty much done. Now we just got to close it up. So I'm gonna just be running a temporary intake, so I'm gonna use these cork gaskets for the China wall. Normally you would not want to do that. Most people don't. You'll get these cork, or there'll be like a rubber that will fit in these little dowel holes or whatever they are called. They're usually not the best, but right now we don't care. It's just being a placeholder for us. So we'll get that on there. And again, same deal on this. I'm not going to worry about putting any sealant because I'm planning on taking this right back off. And on goes the intake manifold. Put the intake on. The last step is to go ahead and put on our valve covers. We're going to go like this. And we're going to be putting on these black Chevrolet valve covers. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up the 385 stroker build. In the next episode that you'll see this thing, we will be dropping it into the frame, and we're going to be installing some new motor mounts whenever we go and do that. Not just the motor mounts that bolt on the block. Obviously, we're going to need those, but we've got some new frame side mounts as well. So thank you guys all for watching. Hopefully you got some benefit and you liked the video. If you did, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Well, you guys get outside, get wrench on something, piss off your neighbors, disappoint your mom. Until next time, keep on keeping on.
You can see the writing on the pavement.